So I've actually been thinking about getting an orchid, and I know they seem to be sold everywhere now, like here, grocery stores, even gas stations. What are some helpful orchid growing tips and anything to avoid when growing an orchid?
Sure, that's a great question. Orchid happens to be one of my favorite flowering indoor plants. And so the first thing is if you want to be successful growing, and we're talking about an orchid, let's say the Phalaenopsis, because that's what you find usually at the grocery store, at the florist. And start by picking out a very healthy looking one. And one of the things that you want to look for in a healthy and robust orchid is you want to look to see that, first of all, that there's plenty of buds still at the tip of the stem. A lot of times we're attracted to multiple flowers, all these flowers, but there's no buds left. Well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to enjoy that for exactly a few weeks and it's done. But when you realize that the orchid opens the flower buds from the bottom of the stem up, you could always kind of project how much time will this orchid be flowering in my house by how many buds are still not open. And so that's something I always look for. I look then to the roots. I make sure that the roots look nice and green, those aerial roots that are sticking out. If they're gray and shriveled and look a little bit like they've dehydrated, that means that they haven't been watered properly and the plant can be under stress. Be aware that orchids are planted either in orchid bark typically or moss. If you're the type of person who forgets to water your plants, you may want to go for the orchid that has moss because it retains a little more water longer than the orchid bark. But there's a caveat to that. A lot of the times beginners with orchids, they tend to overwater, they saturate that moss and it really holds on to the water and it starts to rot out the roots. So be very aware of the planting media. Is it the orchid bark? Is it the moss? And know that the orchid bark is going to dry a little bit sooner. But in either case, what I recommend is when you get it home, you water it once a week. It shouldn't be more than that unless it's super duper hot indoors and you have no type of air conditioning. But I would say once and make sure that it's thoroughly watered. That's where the water comes out from the bottom. And that is one of the most important things for the health of your plant. The other thing is you want to look at the stem when you're selecting it and also while you're taking care of it. Make sure that it's nice and sturdy. And you want to look at the leaves. The leaves should be a light green. I don't know if you're aware of that. A lot of people like dark green in plants,
Right.
but dark green means it's getting probably too much sun. And it doesn't want direct sunshine because in nature, this is an understory plant and it is comfortable with bright light, but indirect light. So don't put it near your window. And look at the leaves. It'll tell you a lot about the health and happiness of your orchid. If it's splitting, if you see like little accordion kind of vents to it, that means it was dehydrated at some point. So pass on that and also take good care of your orchid so that it doesn't start to look like that also. Those are the most important things. I mean, temperature is really important. In, an orchid is a phalaenopsis is very comfortable indoors, bright light, and temperatures that we're comfortable with, guys. Anywhere from 65 to maybe 80 at the most. And what really is important, though, if you want to have this orchid blooming for 50 years, not continuously, but these orchids can last that long if you take care of them. What you want is to make sure that the temperatures at night drop about 15 degrees. I mean, this is probably the tip I've given to people that has surprised them the most because they actually try it. And, I'll get feedback maybe a season later. Surely it worked. I got my orchid to rebloom. And that was because it was placed in a room where the temperature drops 15 degrees. It likes a little bit of humidity around it. So if you want to put a few of them together so that, they can breathe on each other, that's a good thing. Or you can supplement with some pebbles with water in a saucer, or maybe put on a humidifier. Those are the essentials. There's a lot more you can do. And actually, I have a video on YouTube that's had thank God, over 3 million views. And I'll tell you something, Joey and Holly, for you guys are radio experts, audio experts. It's got the worst sound, but people still watch it. So I guess it's got good information.